Scotland, stand up! The second of three fighters representing Scotland coming up this UFC, making his UFC debut with a name that is incredibly close to Christian Duncan. It's just Chris Duncan, the problem. And for Duncan, he's going to be taking on Venezuelan Fighter Omar Morales, and he was on the lowest rung of the nickname tier list that we had here on the channel, so you can check out that video. But for Omar Morales, on extended hiatus, we haven't seen him in about a year. The last time he took on Uros Medic, he got dropped twice in the second round and finished a little bit of an early stoppage, but when you get dropped twice, it is what it is. And Morales, in his last four fights, has been really tricky. Got dropped by Gaethje in the third round of their matchup. He beat Shane Young, looked really good in that fight, and he also got completely out-wrestled and dominated by Jonathan Pierce. So for Morales, a reset, this one at 155 pounds, as was the fight against Medic. But Chris Duncan is not nearly as big as Uros Medic. Both of these guys with some Bellator successes, they saw that. And for Chris Duncan, he was one of those guys that needed two opportunities on the Contender Series. First one didn't go his way. Gritty first round, and then in the second round, he ends up getting caught by a counter hook from one Slava Borshev. Duncan goes down under the regional scene, picks up a win over a man who was 6-4, and then Duncan's last time out, week 2, Dana White's Contender Series, main event slot, he takes on Charlie Campbell, and in that one, Matt...
What a fight.
Duncan wins by first round knockout in a spot where it was almost like Dan Hardy, Carlos Condit, but they both threw straight punches. It's just Duncan's hit the face and Campbell's was off a little bit. Campbell gets floored and he's asleep with his eyes wide open.
It's as good of a one-round fight as you'll ever see.
But that's the point. You're going to forget that if you just look numbers on a page, there's one knockdown. It's Chris Duncan landing on Campbell and Campbell hitting the floor. I counted 3 knockdowns.
Chris Duncan got hurt.
I counted 3 knockdowns for Campbell where Duncan got hit, floored, had his hands to the mat and like pushed himself back up or knee and popped back up.
I've never felt those highs and lows watching a Contender Series fight. I can honestly admit that.
Yeah, Chris Duncan went through the ringer in that matchup, and Dana White, God love him, with his t-shirt tucked into his jeans saying, Chris Duncan, you're through, bud. A good opportunity for Duncan. But Matt, for both of these guys, Omar Morales, we've seen it in some fights where he pulls out a trap card of he can offensively wrestle. Defensively, he can struggle a little bit. I'm interested to see what we get out of Omar Morales because I went back through on his Instagram and it has been, 25 weeks since his last picture with Killcliff FC. He's been training out of the KO zone down in South Florida, out of Miami, and he spent a little bit of time back home because for Omar, his father invented a style of martial arts called Slam. So he's been at Slam MMA a little bit as well.
Would you agree with me, though, that this is a weird fight? Because normally when you have the prospect, they can fight in a lot of different ways. You're not really confident about how they're going to approach a matchup. I'm pretty confident I know how Chris Duncan's going to fight this fight. Like, it is going to be one of those car accident type of matchups. But for Omar Morales, you brought it up. He can mix in the wrestling. Sometimes he will throw a lot of volume. Sometimes he'll throw with power. Sometimes he will just get caught in the mirror with his hands up on the back foot. And that's what's going to be interesting about this fight. Because at 37 years of age, it's going to be interesting to see what Omar Morales does. Because we know Duncan's going to come with that big storm in that first round, be it better or for worse. Like, if Chris Duncan fought Justin Gaethje, it's probably over in 30 seconds. And Gaethje's probably getting his hand raised. But for Duncan in this matchup, we have seen Omar Morales struggle once he gets pressured in fights. Now, be it a lot of those guys do threaten not only with their striking, but with their wrestling too. And I'm not sure if Duncan's going to be able to have that level of success in this matchup. But I do think Morales is the more technical guy. And that's the weird thing. If you just look at their 5 on in, you look at, hey, Chris Duncan's 4-1. He's had a lot of stoppage victories. That looks pretty good. And he is the much younger fighter. But for Omar Morales, you bring up the Gaethje fight. He looked pretty good in that matchup. I know he didn't win the fight, but it's not like he got completely outclassed. Yes, as the fight went on, he did start to slow. And I guess that's my question. For Omar Morales, he always has been a very good 2.5 round fighter. The last kind of half of that third round, you'll wonder about how much his opponent can kind of make up the difference. But in this fight, I do think Omar is going to have the better cardio, depending on how good defensively he can be earlier on.
The weirdest part is we get called out by a number of commenters every single week as you guys always go with the prospects, or you guys never pick the older fighters. And this is one thing that we got caught with Omar Morales in some of his fights. He has not had those road miles added onto the odometer like some older guys have. And I know he's 37. He only has 14 pro fights. I think the road miles in the last few are going to start to catch up a little bit. But you go down through it. I mean, 3-3 in the UFC. He had a win over in Bellator over Troy Naraki. Finished him in the first round. Then he beat Harvey Park as a big underdog. Harvey Park at one point, a big big time prospect over with the LFA, champ over there, and that just sent his career into a tailspin. We haven't seen Harvey Park since. The one thing I should say, Morales is supposed to fight back in January against Mateusz Rambeski. Morales out of that fight, and then shortly after booked into this fight against Chris Duncan. So I'll be interested to see what we get. Again, camp change for Omar Morales. He is a tricky guy on the outside to figure out because he is the ultimate technician with his strikes.
He's a good defensive fighter, yeah.
Morales in his last fight against Medic, it's the same thing as Duncan. I think Medic gets 2 knockdowns. I counted straight left is knockdown number 1, left hook is knockdown number 2, right hook knockdown number 3. I counted 3 knockdowns for Ruish Medic in the second round of that matchup. So for Morales, a long time away to rest and recover. For Duncan, likewise, he hasn't fought in a long time. Week number 2 of Dana White's Contender Series was, almost 6 months ago? Almost 7 months
ago, yeah.
So a long time away for both of these guys. And if you look at it for Duncan, 7 knockout wins on his record, 1 by submission, 1 by decision. So 2 guys that are the ultimate finishers. We have a look at the odds. Very, very close in this matchup. If I'm not mistaken, Omar Morales is the slight favorite here. But if you do, he is slight favorite, minus 115 or thereabouts. So pick 'em odds. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. Surprised us that, as they are to you. Topology voters lately haven't been wilding out like they have.
No, they haven't.
But I'm still going to say over-under 67.5% with the problem, Chris Duncan.
I think they'll be over.
I think they're going to be over? Way over! You're wild again, Topology. So 788 total votes, 81% Duncan, 73% by knockout. For the 19% that are Morales, 60% by decision. Do you agree with the Topology voters here?
I do. I'm going to be going into that narrative that all those commenters are saying, hey, you guys are only picking the younger fighter. I do like Duncan in this matchup. Now, I can admit that his over-aggressiveness is going to get him caught against some of the higher level athletes in this division. Like we always say about 135, 145, 155, you need a very meaningful win streak to finally break into the rankings. And I'm not sure if Duncan's going to be able to do that. That's just my honest opinion. But I do like him in this matchup against Morales. I think he will be the more aggressive fighter out of the two. And I think that will help him win at least the first round and probably the second round too if he's not able to get a finish.
It really is tough though, because if you look at it for Omar Morales, you rush in there, you can have a lot of success. Medic set it up in the first round, kind of was able to really plan away and go after that game plan in the second round. And for Morales in that fight against Medic was coming off the loss to Jalen Turner, and nobody really knew what we were going to get out of him as a fighter. I like Morales in the matchup, and I think he can kind of play coy, but somebody that can rush him like a guy in Chris Duncan, that could cause him all sorts of issues. So we're split on the pick in this one. I'm going with a guy whose nickname I don't necessarily love in the Venezuelan Fighter, Omar Morales. Matt going with the problem, Chris Duncan. Let us know down below in the comment section who you have. Some big-time fights left on this card, including the title fight at welterweight up at the top, the trilogy matchup. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.